It's time to wake up and open your eyes to the matrix. This is going out to the truthers and patriots. Living free and dying hard, speaking through battle scars. An army of one becomes a global resistance. Like I was chosen by God, I was sent with a message to destroy the new world order.
Basically, I got started as an activist on the Real ID issue. Never been an activist before. Principal reason was because of the biometric issue. Facial biometrics, I believe every state is using equipment that makes for a biometrically compatible digital photograph. So we passed a law in 2007, SB 464, to prohibit Real ID. In Oklahoma, the feature of that bill was not the funding, like a lot of states. Really, that was the biggest issue they had. But in Oklahoma, one of the biggest issues was the biometric issue, because they were collecting biometrics and sharing. And if you understand how facial recognition technology works, it basically measures your face, reduces it to a number. A lot of people understand how Social Security numbers, you want to keep it protected, because they're linked to all this other data. People can access things. Social Security numbers. So basically, your facial recognition, your facial biometrics, it's kind of like having your Social Security number across your face. But the reason that I came into Fusion, researching deeply Real ID and how that could create basically a global biometric surveillance system. It's very frightening. The CCTVs, the international standards that the biometrics on can be tracked anywhere. And there's so many things wrong with that, I don't know where to start. So in Oklahoma, we had, in our bill, specified that they were not to take any more biometric or keep it or share it to purge the databases, and all. None of that has happened. But we had a bill come up last session that looked innocent enough, but it essentially said that the DPS commissioner could access the DMV database for the digital photographs and share it with whoever you wanted. And all of this goes back to the Fusion Center. Essentially, any law enforcement, I've talked to a lot of officials and they'll say, well, I'm not OSBI, or I'm not Department of Highway Patrol, or I'm not this or that. But they all connect because of the Fusion concept. It's all about information sharing. And one of the big issues with Real ID, with any of these systems that have interlinking databases, is the public-private aspect. And that is a huge portion of the fusion concept. We asked, we had a senator ask for our the MOUs, the Memorandum of Understanding, that DPS or any of the agencies that were really, really close to the Fusion Centers, if we could have them all. These are how many there are. There are memorandums of understanding and agreements and non-disclosure agreements with ChoicePoint, Germany, to directly share driver's license information between Oklahoma and Germany directly, a bunch of federal agencies, private industry. And the problem is when they start linking up these databases with these private companies, if you know anything about ChoicePoint, and I'm going to leave you guys a bunch of papers to read that kind of gives an idea of what goes on with these, they're error-filled. They're horrible. The government databases aren't that great, and you can see the congressional research that they've done. They're not all that impressive. But ChoicePoint, they've had people pull their records, and maybe 9 out of 10 wrong. People lose jobs because of that. There was a fellow that lost, he was turned down for 9 jobs before he finally realized, because it was Home Depot told him that your background didn't check out. And he was listed as a felon and said that he had been in prison for 7 years, which was not true. And so then he realized why he may have lost those other jobs. So this sharing of information can have real discriminatory effects on people. They may never even know. We don't have any way to know what they have. We have no way to make sure it's corrected. And so a lot of them are not following some of the basic regulations that were implemented back in the 70s for this very reason, to protect people from these sort of things. And so, I mean, that's essentially what I'm going to tell you guys. I've left you a lot of papers. One thing that I came across, and I wanted to show you this real quick, that concerns me. This is a California document, Vision 2015, Department of Justice in California. And I won't bore you with all the details, but I looked at it and I had to look at it again. They just talk about information sharing with DPS, law enforcement, basically fusion process, public-private partnerships, and they set out their goals. Goal number 2 is to implement mobile technology for cite and release arrest processing in order to increase arrests received by Department of Justice by 30%, populate court calendars with arrest and verifying fingerprint information, complete the arrest cycle and forward the information to the FBI, allow courts to submit depositions with fingerprints positively linked with the original. It goes on to talk about the cite and release. I know a lot of times when people get arrested for activism, they'll keep them for 24 hours and let them go, they won't charge them. And that's what they're talking about. But their specific goal is to increase arrests received by DOJ with those biometric fingerprints. The thing that's disturbing is it goes on basically.
I hate to cut you off, but I need you to, if you can, because we're going a little long here. I need you to bring this into our charge, if you would, please.
I'll finish it up right now.
I don't know if you might have examples from Oklahoma about what they might have done with legislative oversight on the MIAC, or not MIAC, obviously, but their fusion center.
I actually went and talked to we did a tour of the Fusion Center, the did a tour, and we have some really awesome officials. Our OSBI director, they're great guys, which actually made it worse for me because looking at the system that they're handling and what they have available to them and what they're allowed to do, these guys, I mean, basically they're not doing anything different, and I believe them. But what when somebody else gets in there and they have all of these tools available to them? We have good guys, and I feel like it puts them in a bad spot. So I feel like it actually is harmful for law enforcement. But I will jump to this one slide here. Goal number 8, they're talking about the mobile devices where they can take your fingerprints or picture in the field. It says support for field identification of high-risk targets, persons under investigations, or it being a possible threat to public safety. If you look at this PowerPoint, the whole thing goes back to Goal 9. They want to expand their Cal photo capabilities, share photos on a national basis, and deploy facial recognition as an investigative tool. I'll do this here with you guys, and you can look at it. I've showed it to a bunch of people, and the gist of it is that they're wanting to get people that aren't necessarily committing a crime. They're wanting to get their biometrics. They're wanting to get it in the national database. That's the whole gist of this. Does that bother anybody a little bit? We're not talking about criminals. Okay, we're talking about, I don't know, maybe people that have too many stickers in their car. It's not about criminals. They're wanting to identify them and put them in a database, and that is frightening to me. So that's what all of this comes around to, and I will leave you, there's a one packet that just lists court cases and lawsuits against various departments for all sorts of violations, and it's real short as far as the whole paragraph stuff.
We'll make sure that all gets put into the record. Were there any things done that you're aware of as far as legislative oversight in Oklahoma as duly elected representatives?
Most of it seems to be done by steering committees and governance groups. I'm trying to think. Aside from, it was an executive order that started, by the governor, that started the Fusion Center. That's one of the problems with it. Doesn't seem to be a lot of oversight. And when you have information flowing that you don't even know it's there and no way to check, it's really, with the private companies, they're not subject to any oversight. They're not subject to the same regulations that federal.
Well, I'm not talking about the private companies. I'm talking about the actual Fusion Center, because they all do have a.
Not that I know of.
They have a board. I just was curious if they.
Other than we had a prohibition against the biometric collection and sharing and all that, and And that's still happening on many levels. Inlets, for instance, you guys, a lot of police officers in here obviously know what inlet is. That has been revamped. And just to show you, these are inlet strategic partners. So you've got BioKey, you've got Redflex, OnStar, Traffic Packs, Pixel, a bunch of private companies. InsureNet, I know, actually has access to our criminal justice system.
But you're not aware of any changes on the legislative front as far as oversight?
I'm not. It's just now coming into our Bill Division 2.
Appreciate it. Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions of this witness? Seeing none, thank you for being here.
If you guys want to see the MOUs, I'd be happy to let you look at them.
Appreciate that. We'll make sure the committee
You haven't
has
got
access to that. And I realize you've driven quite a distance to be here.
My pleasure.
Appreciate
I
your
appreciate it.
dedication.